crazy things everyone used to believe. Hey everyone, it's Alexa and welcome back to another video. There are times when humans assume something, whether it be based on the old facts of the time or just plain old non-scientific deduction, and it turns out to be wrong. That's happened many times throughout history, and it is bound to happen many more. Here, we'll walk you through some of the more comical, unfounded things that the human race bought into at one point or another. But before we get into today's video, make sure that you're subscribed and ring the bell so that you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Our beautiful, flat planet? We'll kick this thing off with a belief that was once widely accepted, but with today's knowledge seems a little bit crazy. Many ancient cultures were wholly convinced that the Earth was just a flat disk or plane floating out in space, and we can't blame them. They weren't very scientifically advanced. Even the Greeks, widely considered some of the smartest and most advanced ancient peoples, thought we could be sitting on a planet with literal, cliff-like boundaries until the 5th and 4th century BC. Eventually, we proved that Earth is round because, well, we saw it from space. But there are still those that subscribe to the idea of a flat planet. The Flat Earth Society even thinks all of the evidence we have of a spherical world is part of a vast conspiracy theory. But what do you think? Train travel was traumatic. Some believed that train travel could be so traumatic that it had the possibility to drive people crazy. We kinda get this one. Early trains had to be a bit sketchy and not as smooth as the train travel of today. There were those who bought into the idea that trains had the potential to drive a person mad because of all the jostling and high speeds involved. It was thought that all the rocking, rattling, and side-to-side motions passengers encountered on a train could injure their brains, which might cause them to leap from the locomotives to their demise. Icepick lobotomies. Get ready for some brutality. At one point in the not-too-distant past, doctors used to have faith in using ice picks to solve some mental health problems. This method was invented by Dr. Walter Freeman in 1946 and was called a transorbital lobotomy. The patient only received a local anesthetic, and it took roughly 10 minutes. It seemed to work, at least in the view of some of the doctors of the day, but most of the time, it caused many lasting, terrible effects. Smoking is good for you? Well, we've all heard this one, and knowing what we know nowadays, it seems pretty wild that a lot of people once actually believed this. Doctors would even prescribe smoking to patients to help with things such as weight loss and, ironically, asthma. At one point, some doctors would even recommend it to women who were pregnant to ease their births. There were certain tobacco products targeted at those with throats too sensitive to handle other products, and things like tobacco toothpaste, which was thought to cure all kinds of ailments. The naivety is almost laughable today. Radiation's health benefits. In the early years of the 20th century, scientists held the belief that radiation was good for people. There were even many radioactive products that were marketed as being able to cure certain ailments like rheumatism and arthritis. People with aches and pains were advised to lie in sand rich in uranium to help ease their suffering. Radioactive toothpaste was sold to those that wanted to make their teeth sparkly and clean. Some were also given radioactive water to gulp down to aid in curing their issues. The radium girls were factory workers whose jobs it was to make watch dials glow by painting them with radioactive paint. They would sometimes paint their teeth and nails with the paint just for fun, and many went on to suffer terrible effects down the line. Marie Curie, the famed physicist, chemist, and Nobel Prize winner, was an outspoken supporter of radiation. She too suffered terrible effects later on in life due to her own contact with radiation. The moral of the story is, we were wrong. Very, very wrong. Gentlemen's germy hands. Today, it may seem like common sense that we need to wash our hands before and after many things, but back in the day, that knowledge wasn't widely known. Surgeons and doctors in the past didn't think that they needed to wash their hands because of a belief that the hands of a gentleman were always clean. This, of course, was based on zero evidence or research at all, and in some cases proved fatal. A Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed a disturbing occurrence. Two hospitals that performed births had two drastically different death rates. Midwives worked at a more impoverished hospital, and their mortality rates were relatively low, whereas rates of puerperal fever were high at a hospital staffed by amazing doctors. Then he noticed that the doctors would perform autopsies prior to delivering babies, but didn't wash their hands. Though he believed some sort of toxin from the bodies was responsible for the fever, germs weren't really well known at the time. We know now that gentlemen's hands aren't always clean and that they do, in fact, need to wash them. Earth is going down. These days, we have plate tectonics to explain many things, like how fossils of the same dinosaurs or animals could appear on continents separated by immense bodies of water. Back in the day, though, before plate tectonics was known or believed, most people thought that huge land masses on Earth must have disappeared due to rising sea levels or crazy geologic events. Bridges of land were drawn between continents with similar features, fossils, and other findings, and at least 6 of these land bridges were commonly accepted. Then a man named Alfred Wegener proposed the idea that the continents may have fit together and been one at some point in Earth's history, explaining all kinds of discrepancies. His theory was called continental drift, but he couldn't explain how the continents drifted, so it was ridiculed, and most were skeptic. Fast forward to the 1960s, when sonar was developed and used to map the oceans, and researchers found evidence of seafloor spreading. This led to plate tectonics becoming the basis of today's geology, and lo and behold, it totally explains all sorts of phenomena that used to be thought could only have happened due to Atlantis-like disappearances. Mu. Speaking of losing land masses, did you know that there was once a reasonably well-accepted idea that a whole continent called Mu not only existed in the Atlantic Ocean, but that it disappeared without a trace as well? To add to the weirdness, the whole idea gained some traction and tried to explain where ancient peoples such as the Maya and Egyptians came from. Augustus Laplangian, a writer and traveler, was the first to come up with Mu, and he said that the Egyptians and Mayan societies were formed by refugees from this continent. The idea was later picked up by James Churchward, who expanded on Laplangian's idea and even said Mu was, at one point, located in the Pacific. Laplangian based his incorrect statements on Mayan writings he had supposedly translated, which he said pointed to an old continent, but we now know that Laplangian was probably just off his rocker. Preformationism. Okay, this one is really crazy, but we can maybe see why this idea may have made some sense to ancient peoples. Preformationism is basically the idea that humans were formed and developed from tiny versions of themselves. Another ridiculous notion that preformationism proposed was that all living things have existed since the beginning of time, just in miniature form. They only grow to be a full human after they're implanted in a woman through a substance that comes from a man and somehow impregnates women. According to people who believed in preformationism, women essentially only acted as an incubator. Therefore, these homunculi, or miniature representations of humans, took on only the characteristics of their fathers, who they have always lived inside. We're glad our world has come a long way since then. The Californian Island. The Spanish once held a misconception that today seems laughable, that hey, mistakes like this happened to those that didn't explore thoroughly enough. Back in the 16th century, the idea of California being an island came into existence. This belief was only held for a handful of years before an explorer was sent to investigate, and he found that California was connected to mainland North America, making just the Baja of California a peninsula. Some maps of North America had been made in the period of island belief, though, and they show it to be completely separated from the mainland. That was quickly changed, and maps following the peninsula discovery showed things how they really are. However, in the 17th century and up through some of the 18th century, more maps were produced showing California as an island, despite evidence against it. The mistake is in the books as one of the most famous cartographic errors ever. Morphine for babies? It's a good thing that science, technology, and parenting have come a long way over time. There was once a belief that morphine, yes, morphine, was an excellent way to soothe a baby. An American product, Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, was given to babies to soothe their aching mouths when they were teething. The thing is, the syrup contained 5 milligrams of morphine, and its claims to relieve the poor sufferers immediately were more than likely true. The makers of the substance also claimed that it was perfectly harmless, which we know today is far from the truth. There were other products containing similar ingredients in Britain already, so it's no wonder so many people in London at the time had severe problems with addiction. We've seen some pretty crazy beliefs humans have held throughout history, and we still have just one more to go. But first, we want to ask you guys, is there anything you used to believe that turned out untrue? Anything embarrassing that you have a hard time admitting to? Admit it to us and the YouTube world in the comments down below. Center of the universe. We'll end this with another now hilarious but historically bought into belief. Back before Nicolaus Copernicus upended astronomy, people used to think that the Earth was located at the center of the universe and that everything else in it revolved around us. Even the smartest of ancients like Aristotle and the most intelligent of the not-so-ancients like Ptolemy thought that we were the center of it all. They wholly believed that the stars, the moon, and everything else they could see at night revolved around the Earth as we remained still. During the day, the sun too made its way around our planet. It took up until the 16th century for the heliocentric, the sun as the solar system center, model to become the common belief. The old views, before we knew that we weren't the center of it all, were called the geocentric model. There are still those that believe the Earth has to be the center of everything, but those people can be thrown into the same boat as maybe flat earthers.